Thank you everybody for coming this morning on this cold Montana morning. I'm Emily Weiler with the Montana Public Health Training Center located at the University of Montana.
Thank you, Emily. My name is Stacy Maloney. I am here supporting the Leadership and Networking workshop this morning. First of all, thank you all for taking time away. I know you have demanding responsibilities, and if you read my email, I just wanted to start with a thank you for all the work that you're doing to keep Montana safe. I split my time between Missoula and Lewistown and hear about the work from all over the state. So thank you so much, and thank you for letting me be part of this workshop today. Just to give you a little bit of my background, fun fact, I think I've lived in probably one of the most populated and one of the least populated parts of our country. I grew up in eastern Wyoming, and I lived for 5 years in Grand Teton National Park. And if you've been there in the summer, it is booming. And if you're there in the winter, there are about 35 people and a big pile of firewood. And then I've also lived in San Francisco and outside of New York City. So I find myself now between Lewistown and Missoula, which I kind of feel like are a nice balance of small and metropolitan in my perspective from growing up in Wyoming. And my background is really leading teams. I've been in retail for a long time. I work for Gap, clothing company, Old Navy, Athleta, if you've heard of those brands. And I lead teams, and I also currently do change management, which whenever we roll out new software or new ways of working, I help put together engagement with leaders, communication plans, and training plans. And so you may not know much about change management as a function, but everyone hates change. That's what I have learned over the past 5 years of doing this job. Even when you're excited about it, it can be tough to go through. And so I know this past year, most of us have gone through tremendous change in one way or another, pretty much outside of our control, things that have been happening. So today, I'm going to start sharing the screen. Today, we're going to really talk about leadership. We're going to have opportunities for networking, and this time is really all about you all. So as we go through the session, I want to just a couple of things up front. I've got 2 10-minute breaks built in. If you need to step away, otherwise I understand, life happens, we're all at home, we've got different responsibilities, but I do have 2 kind of chunks of breaks for us as we go through the session this morning. We're going to do a mix of some networking. I call it speed networking, sort of off the speed dating model of a weird Zoom environment. We're going to do an activity kind of helping you assess where you are in this moment and what you are feeling and thinking this morning. And then we're going to, in the second half of our workshop this morning, really go through an activity talking about what's in your control and what's out of your control. So as we talk about those things, I just want to share the objectives. I'm going to do a lot of talking for the next 5 minutes, and then it's going to be a group effort here. So the objectives are for you to reflect on where you are in the moment and leverage these activities so you can take them back to your staff. I think Emily mentioned to me before you all jumped on that she'll be sharing a PDF of the presentation. So a couple of activities you can just lift and shift and take back to your teams. I want to help you all think through assessing what's in your control, what you need to have in your control that may feel out of control, and then what you just have to let go of. And then throughout the next 4 hours, we're going to have networking opportunities so you can reconnect with colleagues, get to know new people, and just actually talk to people, new people. If you're like me, my whole life is kind of in this room, and so it's nice to sometimes just get to chat with other people. So with that, our agenda, we're going to do some speed networking, then we're going to do what we call 6-word stories. If you're not a story writer now, you will be in about 15 minutes. We're going to do some more networking, then we're going to do an activity, a break with some breakout rooms together on control and acceptance. If we've got time, we'll do a 3rd round of speed networking, and then I'll let Emily wrap it up with the survey on the course. Before we go, I know that's a lot to kind of throw at you. at 9 o'clock this morning, but any thoughts, questions before we dive into our first networking? All right. Like we mentioned, if you can have your video on for most of the time. If there are times when I'm just going to be talking for a few minutes, I'll say you can turn your video off. I know sometimes it's nice to not see yourself on screen, or to just be able to look in a different direction. Our first activity, it's 6-word memoirs. I don't know if any of you have done this before. Raise of hands if you've heard of this, done this. This was introduced to me almost a year ago. It was my last, I think it was my last social event before COVID shut things down. Lewistown had a Women Lead Central Montana workshop, and a woman took us through a similar activity. You can find activities on 6-word memoirs all over the internet. Like, it's been around for a very long time. They've published books with 6-word memoirs. And so the 6-word memoir started, legend has it, Ernest Hemingway was in a bar, go figure, and was challenged to write a novel in 6 words. And so I think if any of you, I've been to Ernest Hemingway's home in Florida, and it's Ernest and all of his wives around him. So he brings with him quite a lot of confidence that he could write a 6-word novel. And so, for sale, baby shoes never worn. And so that was the first 6-word memoir that was out there. And you can see within 6 words how you can really tell a story. And so you can go online and look at 6-word stories. They're kind of fun. I've done this with a lot of different groups. I was working on the materials for class on New Year's Eve. And so I put my first one in here. I'm done 2020, be nicer 2021. Some of these I just found online. Buy the ticket, take the ride. This one, if you've got children, 6 words tells a story. Devastated daughter wanted pancakes, not waffles. I think you could probably tell what was going on in the entire house that morning. Let's see. Found a new mountain to scale. What I didn't expect changed me. And then this was from a woman that I work with, bowl full of cereal out of milk. And this was right after the night I was boiling pasta and realized we had no pasta sauce and had to run to Town and Country and get something to finish dinner. So I think this has been 2020 in a nutshell. It feels like every time you get something going, then something else kind of knocks you back. And so the first time I did this, I was like, I'm never going to be able to, I'm not a writer. I can't write 6 words. But we're going to go through just an activity. So kind of step by step, 2 or 3 minutes. So if you've got pen and paper next to you, you're going to need it for this for sure. But we're going to go through, and for about the next 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, I'm just going to give you an opportunity to just think about where you are in this moment. And I want you to think about this moment. We know this past year has been crazy. We know it's a lot to think about the entire year ahead. And so try to kind of hone in on, how's it going today? Or how are you feeling about whatever right now? So your 6-word story, you can think about work, personal, extracurricular activities, anything that you want. But I'm gonna give you probably 4 minutes, and I'll check in with you after about 3. And we're just gonna write down, brainstorm all different kinds of words that describe where you are today. I want you to think about this activity too as an easy activity to take back to your team. So part of today is about you, and part of it is about just giving you ideas to work with your teams, like something fun, kind of a morale booster, or ways of engaging in different approaches to bringing people together. So take that list that you brainstormed, and if I can get just kind of reflect through, take a minute or 2 and reflect on the 2 or 3 words that you think are most reflective and important to capture how you're feeling in this moment about, well, I have career journey on here, but I think that's not necessarily career journey, but in this moment in the work that you're doing or in your life, or however you want to define it today. All right, now when you've got the 1 or 2 words, if you've circled 2 or 3, kind of then narrow it down one more time to 1 or 2 words. And I would say just free write about those words, like just whatever you think about those words, write it down. So I'll give you about 1 or 2 minutes to free write on that. Let me set our timer here. And if you need something to jog your creativity, I seem to find myself writing about our puppy this morning. So I'm now like taking the puppy and just writing a bunch of words that kind of describe what's going on around that topic. All right, now you have 1 minute to bring it into a 6-word story. So hopefully now you've kind of got a list around that 1 or 2 words that you can start to piece together in your 6-word story. We're going to go around and just say just our 6 words, no context, nothing more than just your 6 words. And then we'll have time after everyone goes to add a little context if you've got questions, comments on other people's stories. And I really thank you all for showing up and being just open to doing just new things. And I hope, like I say, that these are things that you can, easy things that you can go and do with your group or your teams that don't take a lot of time and are kind of fun, easy things that you can check in on. And I find it really fun to do this maybe once a month and go back and see where you were, because I'll share this summer. One of the first ones I did during COVID was coffee, exercise, work, garden, wine, repeat. I felt like I was in quite a every day was Groundhog Day, and then I'll do it at a different time, and a whole new moment in time comes up. So, all right, if you haven't, just connect those words, try different combinations, and I'll give you 1 last minute, and then we'll go around and share. All right, it looks like everyone is back in the main room. I would just love to open it up if people have comments or feedback on kind of this activity. I will say that when I've done this before, with the class that I taught, for sure, when we did just 2 different nights of this, a couple of people gave me the feedback that they probably would not have felt so comfortable if they were in an actual networking situation to go up to people and have this many conversations. And so it was interesting and eye-opening for me, hearing from people who were self-proclaimed introverts that find it difficult when you throw out the word networking, to think like, oh, it gets people nervous. I also taught public speaking at the University of Montana, so I seem to put myself in situations where people bring the most nerves they have in their life to the situations that I'm in. But just kind of curious how this, when we said networking, what you thought it might be, and what you've experienced so far in just this type of situation. So I'll kind of open it up if anyone.
This is Jen with out of Missoula. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Same thing. I depending on what time frame in my life, I've been an introvert, I've been an extrovert, and while I lean towards being an extrovert, I miss the camaraderie with staff and the community, and so this has been really hard. But when I hear networking with people that I don't necessarily know, I'm probably more of an introvert. So this works really well for me. And when I heard networking, I'm like, oh gosh, we have to like talk and what is going to happen. And so it was nice to have those examples, Stacy, that you shared with us, because it kind of gave us that icebreaker to kind of talk about those things. Yeah, I like this formatting. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
I also appreciated being in this environment and getting to know people. I am an introvert, and so I very much like just like having the breakout room, just a smaller, quiet, more intimate one-on-one space. And part of what works so well, I think, for me in this environment is that if I were like live in real time, it's just like, I think my anxiety would increase not only with being asked to network, but also just like all of the noise around me, that it makes it difficult to hear the person and give them my full attention. So it was nice to like, because I was imagining some conferences you've been to where it's like, I just want to try and focus on you, but there's so much going around. And so this was just a nice, easy way to get to know one another in a kind of a quiet, peaceful setting.
Good. Anybody else that on screen or off screen you want to just?
I think when I signed up, I didn't even see networking in the option. I just saw morale and I was like, oh, I could use some of that. So it worked out.
I hope you're feeling that that's been part of it as well. And I always think about when, I think, Mary, when you said if you're live, and the pluses and minuses, I think for me, when I'm live and in a big room and you really want to go talk to somebody, but like there's that awkward moment of you're kind of standing there and you don't want to interrupt, and then you end up just standing there by yourself.
Yeah.
So I like in this format, as it's kind of played itself out, that you don't have to worry about showing up alone. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to be put in and paired up, and everyone's going to be in the kind of the same boat. All right, we'll have another opportunity at the end if there's anything else that comes up that you think, oh, it would even be better if we did it this way, or throw out some ideas to build on, because I think the way I approach most trainings is I like to throw something out there and then let people evolve and come up with a better way or a different way of approaching it. So now on to, I tried to find one of the calmest pictures I could find for the control and acceptance part. So within this next section, we're going to get into breakout rooms with probably between 3 and 4 people. You'll have your same breakout room probably over the course of 3 different small sessions, but we're really going to talk about control and acceptance, and hopefully they don't feel like they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. So when we start to think about it, I want you to first just kind of reflect on, you know, whatever timing seems right for you. But over the past, I look at it myself, the past almost year, and start to assess personal impacts of different phases that we've experienced. And I have a slide that now makes me laugh because we reviewed it before the session, and it looks a little more orderly than I think you'll remember 2020. And we're going to start to brainstorm things that are in our control and out of our control. And so that is a wide range. That can be, I think, Emily, if you don't mind me using your example, in your control, dressing yourself in the morning. Sometimes it feels like just that level of, I can control this today, is something to hold on to. And I know people are, you know, hybrid schools, you've got new pets, you've got work in a whole new environment. So some things are feeling really out of your control, really into your control. And then sometimes things that we put on that out of control list, we're like, I have got to figure out how to get that into my control. And so we're going to work through this exercise with support of each other this morning and come up with ways to like rethink and kind of reposition and shift the way we think about things to move it into our control, or at least part of it. And the idea for this morning is kind of twofold. One is for you all to start to take a moment and really think about what's on either of those lists of in and out of control. And then also start to think for your staff and the people that you're working with, how to frame things and make sure that you're spending as much time as possible on the control things. And then in the out of control, sometimes just letting it go. And so I'll sort of share some of my thoughts. One is I no longer have an office in San Francisco where I work for Gap. For those of you who have joined, my job is working in Gap in our San Francisco office. On a good note, I moved back to Montana for the third time, but I'm back in Montana and I'm really happy, but I don't have an office anymore. So I had to rethink, I had to set up a home office, I had to do a lot of things, and that's the part that was in my control. The out of my control is I still can't go to an office like that. I had to just let that go. In some cases, it's you can't go out to dinner with friends anymore, but I've heard some of you say I've got a fire pit in the backyard, and I've got a neighbor with a fire pit, and so usually it's the 2 or 3 of us who sit around socially distanced in an outside fire pit, and we can still get together, but we can't go out like we used to. And then other things, I have a holiday party every year. I didn't have a holiday party this year. Like, some things are just, you gotta let it go. And so those are just small, simple examples, but we're just gonna go through it kind of in a systematic approach that will also send you information that you can think about taking your teams through these similar activities. And so then we'll kind of end with an example or a little activity where we kind of hold each other accountable for focusing on something in the control bucket. So kind of gear up for feeling uncomfortable as you start to think and put down on paper that there are some things that are outside of your control that you probably can't do much about. So this next slide, when we were looking at it this morning, I put together just a 2020 hindsight, the roller coaster, and the feedback was, but it looks so orderly. It looks so like clean and crisp, and it all like fit together so nicely. And it's funny, I should redo this slide because it's just the probably complete opposite for all of us, the reality than what this slide looks like. But this is just a stake in the ground. But if we kind of think back on 2020, I know some of us just want to put it away and not think back on it. But, phase 1 I kind of have this a mix, but a lot of what was going on in the world and also in the state, March, we're not even anniversarying March yet, but it was the grab your computer, go home. We're going to be home for a while. Students are out of school. We're going to homeschool. I think we all had the news on 24/7. Non-essential businesses were closing. This whole we're in it together, the whole world is shut down right now, happened in March. And then by April and May, I think a lot of people, if you had a 6-word story, someone wrote one about days feel like weeks and weeks feel like days. Retail stores, restaurants were closed. People started to realize my kids are here to stay. They're not going back to school this year. And then I don't know about you all, and for me, I felt like everyone wanted to have a Zoom happy hour and talk about the awkwardness of spending time together. I think that was just a part of the awkwardness. One fun story, my friend was in a Zoom happy hour and she wanted to get off because she was feeling like, okay, I've had enough social. I just want to absorb what I need to on my own. And her friends are like, you have nowhere to go. Plug your computer in, take it to the kitchen, make dinner. Was that awkwardness of, no, I don't really have anywhere to go, but I don't want to be on Zoom anymore. And then phase 3, we started seeing, over the course of the summer, a lot of ambiguity of our kids going back. What does it look like? How do we go back to school? Some phased reopenings, we would reopen something, then we would pull it back, then reopen again, pull it back. And then COVID really began to hit across the whole country. And I'm telling you all what you already know, it was a slow burn. And then we were really seeing it. And then by phase 4, we've got hybrid schools, cases spike, mask mandates are continuing. And so as I think through 2021, this activity is really meant to help you start to think about what can you put to the side that you don't control, and what can we bring into our control? So just gut reactions. Does this feel too orderly? That was the feedback earlier. Do you look back on the year? I mean, this is, like I say, just I pulled out a few pieces of things, but when you look back on the year, does it feel like it was more than 10 months ago that we were shutting things down? Okay, so now let's get into the inner control piece. So if you've got your pen and paper handy, before we break into rooms, so you've got some thought starters to take with your group, just jot down 2 or 3 things that you feel like this is in my control. It can be work things, personal things, family things. Just jot down 2 or 3 things. I'll give you about a minute. Jot down things that you're like, I got this. This is in my control. All right. Now Emily is going to create breakout rooms. This breakout room you're going to have for the next 3 sections. So just know that you'll kind of be spending your time with the same 3 or 4 people over the rest of this activity. So you get some consistency and you can kind of talk about what's in your control. But we're going to spend 8 to 10 minutes. We'll kind of check in, maybe pop into the rooms around 7 or 8 minutes and see how the timing feels. But I really challenge you to come up with some very thoughtful ideas on what you control, especially when you think about work. I know that we're here through your work, and think about the things that you can control, that you can really feel good about, like we've got this. And then as you work through, we'll probably have you focus on the things that really resonate across the team. So spend the first few minutes just kind of sharing out things you control, then start to brainstorm together like anything additional. And then in the last couple minutes, we'll give you kind of a 2-minute warning to we'll come back together and have you share 1, 2, 3, whatever, somewhere in there, of the things that really resonated with your whole group. Or one that was really a fun one that you want to share with everybody, or one that was a surprise. So at this point, I will hand it over to Emily to break us out into rooms. We'll set the timer for about 10 minutes, but we'll come and check in maybe around the 6 or 7 minute mark and just get a thumbs up, down, like timing wise, how you're feeling. So we'll go ahead and kind of do the next section together, and then we'll come back and present both. So if you want to finish some thoughts that you had, we'll probably set it for 15 minutes for the second half of the activity, so that you've got time if you need to go back and kind of have a couple minutes for the first half. But we'll kind of do the same exercise. And this is my only uncomfortable picture I think I chose for the session, but that out of control feeling. Like, what do you feel like is just way out of your control? So
and
maybe
you're not sharing your screen.
Of course I'm not, because I went into a breakout room. So there you go. The out of control feeling. So now take, a minute or 2 as, again, the thought starter, and jot down a couple things that are out of your control. Again, work, school, personal life. I don't know if it's my personal mindset this morning, but I feel like my out of my control list is far longer than my in my control list this morning. It is what it is. But we'll now, we're going to give you 15 minutes in this breakout room, and then we'll bring you back and we'll do kind of a time check before we do another 10-minute break. So then you'll have a break, and then we do have an extra 15 minutes of cushion in our workshop and our activities this morning. So if you need a little bit more time, we have it. So I want you to be open when we come back after this next 15 minutes, but kind of finish where you were in your control, and then start to make that out of control list. We'll come back after the break, and then we'll start to look at what, the next piece of it, kind of the reframe and the shifting. But by the end of this 15 minutes, hopefully each of your groups will have 2 or 3 things that are the biggest in your control and the biggest out of your control pieces. And we'll share those before we do the last piece of the exercise so you can hear from each other. All right, I just kind of want a show of hands. Do you feel like for your 2 lists and kind of coming up with 2 or 3 things to share, you had enough time? Good enough amount of time. Okay. So we're gonna take our last 10-minute break here in just a minute, and then we're gonna come back. We're gonna have each group share what was in your in control list, what was in your out of control list. Then we're gonna go back in one more time with our group and try to reframe, like what's in that out of control list and how do we reframe it? What things can we control? How do we start to rethink about those types of out of our control things? And then we'll sort of end before our last speed networking with a kind of a personal reframe, something that is going on with you personally. How do you reframe it so that you can hopefully kind of take this exercise and this activity, and if you've got people on your team or people that you're working with that need to kind of think differently about the in and out of control piece that's going on in their world, you can take them through some aspects of this and help reframe or pull apart the things that you need to have in your control. So I think as we kind of look to the second half of this activity, it would be the best time to have each of the groups start by just sharing, and I will probably stop sharing my screen so you all can share. But before we go into opportunities, I think we will go through and allow each of the groups to first start with what you came up with that's in your control. I don't know, either group, feel free to get started and share the few things that resonated with your group. And so in the control, we've got the routine schedules, setting up office space. I think it is sort of what I mentioned earlier, the out of control, the way others react and others' behaviors. We've got politics, policies, guidelines, testing approach. Bob, you were saying even with the antibody tests, like where the money is being spent is somewhat or mostly, I would ask, out of your control. Are you all responsible for any of the testing budgets, or is that all out of control?
Yeah, I don't think at the local level, even though we are decentralized, that's a state, and I don't know, state function pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the vaccines, is that also like the approach to distribution or the number that you're getting? Is that all?
It's state directed, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mention of unknowns, you start to get settled with some of the political decisions, and then now, especially the state of Montana having probably the most transitions of any other state in our state offices, and then taking on new roles. I know, Mary, you're probably not alone. Others, I'm sure, have taken on roles and responsibilities that you couldn't even have known existed a year ago. And so I don't know if others want to add to either of those 2 lists, but in a decentralized space, it sounds like even though you're decentralized, you share a lot of the out of control list pieces.
Yeah, I think Mary mentioned that part of the role was in some of these cases where you had to have more of a public microphone, and so the credibility of your local health agency depended on how effectively you communicated. And so much of the time we're dealing with one-on-one in a lot of our work. But as a public relations person or a public spokesman for a department, it takes on you need to take on more attributes and things that maybe aren't readily at your disposal, and that's very challenging. And so you can feel like you're in a situation where you don't have as much control because you haven't done it before.
Yeah, and I mean, I think many of the people I've talked to around the state in public health, a lot of people have, a lot of experience in this space. So there's a lot of expertise, and then you throw in something that no one has any experience in. So you can't even call somebody that, maybe has experienced this before, because you're all in it brand new at the same time and in a decentralized kind of way. Are there other things that you feel like are in your control before we kind of break apart and start to maybe take some of these things on the out of our control list and talk collectively of ways that, what pieces do we control, or how do we focus on those areas of trying to look at this out of control list? And maybe we can even talk about it as a group, since we're not a really large group. But are there other things that you feel you control right now? I really like the idea of routine and schedule. I think for me, working from home, when this first started, I had some experience working virtually, but now I was working with people all over who had never done it. And so I was getting emails at all hours of the day, where normally the people that were sending me emails at 10 o'clock would be home by then and with their family. They were now, being a homeschool teacher in the morning. And so their schedule extended. So all of a sudden my schedule extended. And this first few months of just a bleeding together of everything. So trying to come up with the simplest of routines to help separate that.
I know one of the,
Sorry, Jennifer, were you going to add something? Or
I think Emily started first. Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, Emily.
I was just going to say, in the things of controlling, COVID wise, I still get to control who I see, where I go. I've been a stickler for the rules, and I know a lot of friends that haven't, but it's like, I can say no to an event. I don't have to go to certain businesses. I can wear my mask and do things my way and how I think it should be done. I know there's limits to that. There's certain places some people have to go, and but I guess in a way it's been powerful to say no. Like, I know that that's an unsafe situation or that's unwise, and being able to be like, no, I'm going to protect my bubble that is in my control.
Yeah, so as we're thinking of it, I think you all are doing a great job kind of already doing some of these things of starting to understand and look at it critically and think, what do I control? What don't I control? And you're already taking strides to take what feels completely out of control and then say, in order to be successful, these are some things I can control, and at least give yourself some sense of normalcy. I think that's what 2020 for me has been about. And I think for many people, it's just trying to find something you can hold on to and you can count on, and this is not going to change for me too much. Like I said at the beginning, I work in change management, and I think the more people can feel like they're along for a journey, you aren't getting like hit with things that are the unknowns at every corner. Like you've got some things to ground you. I think that's when you start to at least feel like you can move forward, and kind of getting back to Cynthia, the small forward motion, like ground yourself and be able to do the small forward motion a little bit. So I wanted to let you all have an opportunity to get back in your groups kind of one more time. And maybe now that we've started to hash out a little bit and share the in our control, out of our control, maybe just share with each other, think about these out of control things that really impact you all, probably most hours of your life, even though you say, this is carving out time for work and this is family. I know with your jobs, it's probably almost impossible to separate the two. But I think maybe just sharing ideas or sharing your struggles with each other will probably just break out in our rooms one more time, maybe for about 10 minutes, like one last time with each other, and then come back and share your best ideas on, or your biggest struggles, if you want to share that. Like, I need to make this thing that's so out of my control. I need to feel like I've got some control over it. And if we, take anything from the list of how other people react, or politics, policies, testing, vaccines, getting pushed into new positions, like what is the one or two things you can do that will allow you to have that grounding? And or what do you just need to let go of? Is there something that you're like, our group just decided we're going to hold each other accountable and we're just going to let go of this one thing because we can't control it as many times as we knock our heads against the wall? We just are never going to be able to control this. So we'll give you...
I'm going to set it for 12.
Yeah, and I'll come in and check at about 6 or 7 minutes and see if 10's enough, or if you want the full 12 minutes. But we'll go in one more time. We'll come back out. We'll kind of wrap this up and think about ways that you can take this back to your teams. And then we'll do one last little speed networking before we go.
Cool.
All right. See you in 6 or 7.
Here we go.
All right. Well, we were going to do one more speed networking. I think we might just do one more quick round with we'll just do one round for like 5 minutes. So you get one more chance to connect with somebody. But then we're going to come back and really talk about what you can take away, how we can take this back to your teams. And if there's anything that you're like, how did we do this? Or, any questions or thoughts, or the best part of this, or other things you'd like to see, or other things that would be helpful, we'll just kind of do a 10-minute wrap up. So we'll do just one more to kind of break up from this activity, and then we'll come back and kind of bring it all together. So I'll let Emily, and you can tell me what 5 minutes feels like versus the 8. So I said before, when people are only together for 5 minutes, it might feel like, oh, we just kind of got rushed, but I'm always looking for, thoughts on that one. So the 5 minutes, did it go a lot faster?
I think so.
So these were sort of the speed networking topics, but I'd like to just open it up for, if there's anything you wanted to share. This was sort of like during COVID. For the holidays, somebody sent me a COVID bingo, like, oh, I got engaged, I got a pet, I, stopped wearing pants, like Emily said. If there's anything, the out of my control to the in my control that you wanted to share, we've got about, 10 minutes to kind of bring this all together. Anything that you think that you want to take back with your team and share, like something from the workshop that you're like, this would be easy to take back to the team, or this would work the best with my team, or even a different perspective on things. I just want to give us this last 10 minutes to kind of open it up. Feel free to just shout out things that are on your mind, or that you want to share, or that you didn't feel like you got to in the last little bit. So I can kind of kick it off. Anything that you think you could share with the team, or you want to share with the team when you go back?
I think the challenge for a lot of us might be, or at least for me, is what kinds of questions can I throw at the team to kind of get them engaged and in dealing with, attitudes and issues that are affecting their performance either on an individual basis or on a team basis. And those conversation starters sometimes takes a little creative thought, and I haven't really put it down on paper, but how do you open that door, I guess, is the question to get the discussion going.
And I would open it up to the group if others have ideas on those conversation starters that you found useful, helpful. I've got some thoughts, but I would love to hear from others in the group.
I think the idea of just starting a meeting with some sort of jumping off points is really helpful, because I feel like so many meetings have an agenda per se, but usually it gets to a point where you don't know where to start or end. And so I feel like the questions do help that, just keeping it more, I don't know if efficient is the right word, but it might be more efficient.
Two things come to mind, Bob, and I don't know if this hits on what you're getting at, but also in starting meetings, especially, the more virtual you are, I think the more difficult it gets. But starting meetings with something light and fun, even one simple little game that this sounds very simple. My friend teaches 3rd grade online in San Francisco, and she uses it, but it's sort of like the starting with are you, New Year's resolutions, yay or nay, and getting people to kind of like do 3 or 4 things that are kind of lighthearted and fun. Put somebody on your team in charge of coming up with like simple icebreakers so that every meeting starts with people at least at ease. Because I think that in the world of Zoom, you come in and it's like, okay, what do we need to cover? What do we need to cover? And there's not the moments, those little moments before when you're in a room together that you used to sit next to somebody and have a little chit chat. And so it's almost like what's the new sort of putting people at ease, I think. And so put a different person in charge of an icebreaker, and the first time or two, it's going to feel a little awkward and strange, but you just make it part of every meeting. We're going to do something that's light. I think when it comes to, the questions, the conversation starters about performance and how people are doing, again, I open this up to everybody, but I find putting the personal accountability on somebody else, like what do you see that you're doing well, and what do you want to do differently and improve upon, which you probably have used before, but really putting the onus on the person and not the onus on the supervisor to come with the feedback, but let the person always have that 50-50 part of it. So I don't know if that's getting at it, and if it's not, absolutely, just, we can, others that want to.
I'm looking forward to using some of this. I'm on our department's fun team. We put together basically to do we host 2 social hours a month, and one's during the work, one is at noon on a Wednesday, and then the other one's an evening one. So for that one, we say, bring an adult beverage if you want, we play games. The one during the day, we try to choose something fun, like come with your favorite bingeable TV series or something like that. So we have a topic, but I think something like this, we're gonna do this little activity, how do you build your 6-word story, etc. I think a lot of this will be really handy to bring to those groups. So I'm excited for that.
So thoughts on, Jennifer, go ahead. I was going to say, moving along.
I was just going to say, being in a position where you're reviewing performance and goal setting, I think I like that, Stacy, that I think I tend to use that 50-50, 50-50 approach where, okay, so what are you doing well? And what are areas that we can do differently, so that typically an employee will know what they're doing well, and maybe there are things that they will identify that you don't even realize, is hats shift and transitions, especially with COVID, there are things that the supervisor may not realize they're even doing. And maybe that's taken away from some of the time and some of the expectations on the things that the supervisor may be expecting them to do that they're not getting to. So I think that kind of helps, because job descriptions don't necessarily, even though somebody may hire with a specific job description, those hats tend to change with time. And so kind of having that open dialogue on, how are things going? How do you think things are going? What do you feel like you're doing really well? Like, what are your interests? What do you think could be, how could things be working differently? Kind of come up with, it's a good opportunity to come up with solutions rather than making it as difficult a conversation as it really could be. And I think that you get staff buy-in better when it's their ideas than kind of doing away with the browbeating part. But I'm told I can be soft sometimes, but I think everybody has a different approach to things. When you need to be a browbeater, as a supervisor, that's your job. To build, for team building, I feel like it's good to have employees buy in on those goals that need to be set or improvements that need to be made.
And I think adding on to that, it's even when you do have to call somebody out, like I noticed, this behavior, giving them the additional option to say, what's holding you back from doing this well? Is it additional training that you need? Do you not have enough time in your day? Have you not had enough autonomy? Have I not even allowed you the time to prove to me that you can do it? And give them options to really dissect for themselves why it's not going why they're not performing as they should. And then you can start to open up those conversations. Is it the right job? Like sometimes it's not even the right job or the right fit. And because of the way we hire people, you hire into a job and then you do the job before you really know what the job is. I think anytime you're applying for a new job, you think you know what it is, and until you get in, you're like, oh gosh, this is about 50% of what I thought and 50% different. And I don't know if this is the right fit for me. So, having that open space too, that you can say, maybe not the right fit. So I know we're down to like the last 10 minutes, and I just wanted to kind of close out and really thank you all for coming and having openness to talk about these things. I encourage you to continue some of the networking and relationships and reach out to each other as you kind of get stuck on some of these things. Again, the 6-word story hopefully is something simple you can take back if you want to try that with your team. We'll send you a few of the slides so that you can kind of walk your team through if you'd like to do these activities with your team. I think more so than anything, I just appreciate your openness and your willingness and taking the time out of your very demanding responsibilities and showing up for time for yourself.